What's going on, Los Angeles? How we doing, LAFB fam? Your Bruin dynamic duo, the Thrill and Madman, here back together again to provide all things UCLA football. Really excited to get into a conversation, as always, with my brother from another mother, Will the Thrill Decker. Thriller, how we feeling today? I know you and I are big NBA guys. We'll sort of just start there for fun. I know, unfortunately, Warriors eliminated the great Steph Curry. Of course, his injury changed the entire complexion of that series. But taking a zoom out, Thriller, feels like it's wide open in the NBA. Who is your favorite to win the NBA championship? Let's just start there.
Man, I no friend to Lakers fans, but Nikola Jokic in the Nuggets. If they're able to take down the vaunted OKC Thunder right here, I just think they have to be the favorites moving forward. They've already won a title too, which not every other team has. Minnesota's fantastic. Really like what they've been able to put together, but they felt a little beatable if Steph Curry was out there, at least 6 or 7 games. I think that series would have gone had Steph been healthy enough. The Knicks, I think I'm pulling for the Knicks the most. I love New York City. I love basketball, and the Mecca at the Garden was rocking this past week. And Indiana is just shocking people again. I think people forget they were in the conference finals last year too, taking down the Cavs. But as long as Jokic is out there, he's got to be the favorite, man. That dude is special.
That dude is special. Indeed, Thriller. Well, when we think about UCLA football, Will, I think we've had a special last couple of days, particularly on the recruiting side. What's so interesting is so much of the conversation the last few weeks, last few months, rightfully so, has been all about this 2025 season, the roster construction, the inputs, the outputs, all the transfers. We've joked time and again about you can never have too many defensive backs. We've been talking about challenges at the edge, all the great inputs on offensive line, and really excited about this 2025 class. But what's kind of been a little bit lost in the conversation has been 2026 recruiting until now. 2 big splashes here, recruits number 5 and number 6 to bring, the 26 recruiting class to now 6 members. But Will, 2 major gets, I would say, in a very significant way. 2 defensive guys, 2 guys from California, homegrown, one of which UCLA sort of lineage and royalty. Really excited here, Will. I mean, the first one, Anthony Jones, defensive end, the edge. What a freak specimen this young man is. 6'5", 260. You're talking about the number 34 ranked player in the state of California, number 17th at his position nationally from Crean Lutheran in Irvine, and had offers from the likes of Tennessee, from the likes of Washington, ultimately picks UCLA given what he's seeing from Ikaika Malloy and the rest of this defensive staff and what Deshaun Foster is building. So much needed edge help and that pipeline to come here, Will. Very excited. What a freak athlete he is. And then coupling with Anthony Jones is Matthew Moasau. And if Moasau sounds familiar, the younger brother of the great Darius Moasau, Matthew, coming from St. John's Bosco, also in, homegrown California, one of the SoCal powers, of course, 6'1", 225, coming in about a 3-star, but so much upside there, Will. And just that tutelage from his older brother. Matthew Moasau, Anthony Jones come together, making recruits 5 and 6 for this class of 26. Will, your impressions, your thoughts, what does it mean for you?
I think it gives this team an identity with the recruiting class they're moving forward. And let's start with Anthony Jones. First off, I thought it could have been the Michigan State defensive end we got in the transfer portal. Also an edge, also named Anthony Jones. It's kind of like a who's on first scenario when it comes to that. But you just look at the build and what Anthony Jones is. I mean, 6'5", 260. This guy's going into his senior year. Like, he still has some room to grow there, what he could potentially bring on the edge. And I mean, you mentioned Tennessee and Washington. Those were 2 of the favorites. This guy had offers from Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, the who's who of college football, and he chose to go to UCLA. So that to me is, signifying that Foster and Malloy are building a culture where if you have a good player here, you may want to stay home and play for UCLA. I think that's something that's very big and large within the community. Endless upside. And, with what Malloy's been able to do, he's worked with this defensive line room for 2 years. He has tangible selling points now with these edge rushers and these interior defensive tackles. He worked with Olafemi Oladejo for what was it, like 5-6 games at edge. And the guy's a second-round pick to the Titans, the second pick of the Titans, who had the first pick in the overall draft, completely rebuilding their roster. We talked about in the draft episode. What does it say for the Titans to pick Femi Oladejo as their second in command to Cam Ward to kind of lead that team? So Malloy's got credit there. He's got credit with Liatu Latu, who was the first defensive player off the board. Murphy twins, Jay Toia going in the draft. He has tangibles we can point to. Go, hey, if you want to play in the NFL, UCLA may be the place to go if you want to play in the defensive line. And that's a big, big gift for a guy like Anthony Jones that's that talented. So you get the raw natural ability. And if you can just refine his skills with a guy that's proven to take you from point A to point B, this is a huge win for UCLA. I expect to see Anthony Jones on the field early and a contributor. And he's been the crown jewel of the class thus far through 6 commitments. When it comes to Muwasa, this is big for 2 reasons. Obviously, you mentioned it, the lineage of the Muwasa family. And Darius, I know he was a transfer player, and I know he came in, but he was one of the most memorable players for me in our time of doing this podcast, where our defense took a step forward with him on the football field, because the defense was always the problem with Chip Kelly. When he came in, the offenses, the run games were always going to be right with Chip, but those defenses need to make an extra step, right? When you put in a Darius Muwasa, the defense, his last year there, he really had a firm handle on setting the culture. And I'll never forget being at the LA Bowl when he spoke at the post-game press conference, tearing up, and it meant the world for this guy to put on the blue and gold. And everyone walked out of that room like, what a guy Muwasa is. I had reporters looking left and right saying, this guy, what an all-time dude to have in the locker room. And lo and behold, he gets drafted by the New York Giants. So he's got that NFL talent, that high-level ability. His brother, he's playing at a big-time program, which is the other thing I'm very pleased about. Mater Dei has been USC's bread and butter in the recruiting world, whether it's your liner, it's Matt Barkley's, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think they just got an edge rush commitment this past last week or two.
Sean Mater Dei. Yep.
It seems like, with Mater Dei, if you're a good player, when you go into SC, bud, like that's kind of the next, in line type of movement. Everyone knows there's 2 programs in Southern California that have national, accreditation and control. And another guy we're going to get to that's also Bosco here.
Sir.
But if you can take over and just plant your flag at Bosco while USC has Mater Dei, this could set up rivalries that exist starting in high school going to
no question.
You know what I mean? The pipeline to Bosco, that is one every coach in America wishes they had. So if you can start building that up, I just think it was a no-brainer. Muwasa, even if he wasn't at Bosco, you still want him because of the lineage, the NFL type of upside his brother presented. He was an underrated recruit as well, and look what he got to in terms of his motor and how he did it. But if you can combine getting a Muwasa caliber player with strengthening that Bosco pipeline, it's an absolute home run.
No question, Will. There's so much of what you said that I loved, and we'll maybe start with Anthony Jones. I think your point about what Ikaika Malloy did with Femi Oladijo is one of the most underrated stories in all of college football. It's absolutely insane. Oladijo started edge in the Penn State game. You're talking about 4 or 5 games into the season, you go to edge. And let's not forget, UCLA didn't make a bowl game last year, so the season ended game 12. You're talking about a 7-game body of work at this particular position. And Femi Oladijo goes in the second round of the NFL draft, Will, to your point, as another pillar with the number 1 overall pick in the draft, Cam Ward, for the Tennessee Titans. And so Malloy can go to an Anthony Jones and say, look at what I was able to do over a 7-game body of work. And Oladijo physically was just as much of a freak as you are at this particular age, and you might even have the edge on him, no pun intended. And so if I could do this for 7 games for Femi Oladijo, look at what I could do for you for 3 years in this particular program. And I think it's just such a compelling selling point there, Will, and just the physical ability of Anthony Jones. I mean, this is a guy that's a 99.9 percentile type of athlete at the edge position and at the defensive position overall. So excited there. And then I think, Will, you said it best. Matthew Moasow, the stars don't really tell the story. He's sort of 3-star right now. And for a couple of reasons. One is if you're starting at St. John's Bosco, you got to be a stud, particularly at that linebacker position. Let's not forget, Mater Dei and Bosco are 2 of the top 4 high school programs in America, not in Orange County, not in California, in America. So number one, the fact that you can get on the field at such an elite high school program says a lot about you. But I think, Will, number 2, it is that lineage of seeing your older brother go through the career that he did, starting with Hawaii, then at UCLA. You talk about what a leader he was. He was the captain of that defense in so many ways, Will. And I think that leadership is the thing that made Darius so compelling, even with his on-the-field production. Let's not forget, Will, you're talking about a guy, 3 consecutive 100-plus tackle seasons between Hawaii and UCLA, and now he goes to the New York Giants. You got to believe Matthew was able to soak all of that mentorship up, all of those experiences up. And I think you're picking a kid who not only has a tremendous amount of upside, but you're talking about a kid that's going to be a locker room leader and a team leader for you for multiple years. And so in that regard, he might be 3 stars on the field, but he's 5 stars from a leadership perspective with so much upside. So you got Anthony Jones, this sort of crown jewel physical specimen, and I think Matthew Moasow is sort of a crown jewel from a leadership and an emotional perspective. And now the 2 of them really becoming the first 2 guys defensively for this class of 2026, Will. Now can they become those super nodes and start attracting some other folks? Can Matthew Moasow now start pulling some of those Bosco guys to UCLA, as being an ambassador? And can other guys, both in the state of California as well as nationally, say, man, a guy like Anthony Jones going to UCLA, I want to jump in there. I want to team up. I want to make some things happen. So, that domino effect now, Will, is what I'm very excited about to see moving forward as Deshaun Foster very intentionally now is building out this recruiting class. Will, segueing, we had another huge roster addition, this one via the transfer portal. This one was very interesting, and I'm very excited to get your thoughts on this. Pierce Clarkson, 2-year quarterback, 2-year individual on the roster at Louisville. He redshirted his first year, only had 2 passes for 11 yards his second year, so very underutilized on the roster. Former St. John's Bosco quarterback from 2021 to 2023, long kid, dual threat. Pierce Clarkson decides to transfer to UCLA, which is so fascinating. Obviously, he's coming back home. That's a very exciting proposition. But UCLA, the program that has dominated national headlines at the quarterback position the last 4 weeks or so with the Iamaleava brothers, given that Nico and Madden are here, we've talked so much about the implications of, hey, Demarcus Davis's future and how he's exploring his options. We talked about the implications with the Brady Smigel, all of the elements here with guys, McDaniel, transferring, all of these guys now kind of transferring out because there's a perception that the Iamaleavas are really going to be kind of dominating the quarterback position at UCLA for years to come. Luke Duncan stays, but now here you've got a kid coming in. And so what do you make of this, Will? This is sort of fascinating. A kid sort of built similar to Nico and Madden. And so maybe he sees an opportunity where he can go head to head. Maybe he sees an opportunity where this perhaps with the Iamaleavas is a little bit more short term and he wants to position himself to sort of jump in and compete with Luke Duncan. But just fascinating, isn't it? That everyone's sort of exiting to make way for the Iamaleavas because they've come in. Here now comes Pierce Clarkson coming in. Your thoughts on this situation, Will?
Yeah, Pierce Clarkson, it's intriguing for a couple reasons, and I'll lay them out kind of, in order on what I think is the most important. First and foremost, there might be a kid that with Pierce Clarkson that has been trained as well as Pierce. His dad is famed quarterback guru Steve Clarkson. So this guy worked with Leinart, with Matt Barkley, with Ben Roethlisberger, all of like Steve Clarkson, Dreammaker. Like if you've heard about quarterback retreats and stuff like that, that is his father. So he has worked with this guy since he was born, since he could pick up a football. So in terms of the mechanics, how he reads defenses, how he's studying film, it's in the lineage, man. He's working with one of the best. His dad is one of the best quarterback gurus in the entire country. So you have that in your back pocket. He was going to try to make a run at Ole Miss too with Lane Kiffin there. Didn't exactly work out in the cards. So he's going to bet on himself and come to UCLA. And it's just interesting, man. You mentioned Aguilar, McDaniel, Davis all out. You get the Iamaleva brothers and, Clarkson coming in to transfer. So 3 in, 3 out for UCLA when it comes to the quarterback room. And on top of that, he's a winner, man. I mean, St. John Bosco has 2 national championships under their belt. And the 2022 season, Pierce Clarkson's senior year at Bosco, they won the national championship. According to, USA Today, Max Preps, whoever it may be, they were kind of crowned the, unanimous national champs. And to be a quarterback at that program, you mentioned it, to even get on the field at Bosco, you're a high-level player. To be a quarterback, to be a 4-star talent, you had offers from Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oregon, at Bosco. You're a pretty damn good football player. I think he was looking at Louisville and the Tyler Shuck situation. Shuck actually recovers miraculously and becomes a second-round pick. But I think he was looking at a spot where he can get on the field early. He's now betting on himself again coming to UCLA, and just a young, smaller, crafty quarterback. He's about 5'11", 180 pounds coming out of high school. But the dual threat ability and his ability to read the field and, manipulate the defense, I think there's a lot of upside there. And like we talked about with Moasso, keep that Bosco pipeline strong.
Yes.
I mean, this is a huge advantage to having a lot of Bosco kids, is it's going to make more of these Bosco kids feel welcomed and recruited at a UCLA environment. So when you check off all those boxes, from the development he's had from a young age to his pedigree as a winner to strengthening that Bosco pipeline, where's the downside here? I don't see any.
No, and you know what's so intriguing here, Will, about this situation is wants to come back home, with that pipeline we talked about, the implications. Now you got a Clarkson on the roster, you got a Moasa on the roster, guys who have had so much success with Bosco, now pulling other guys in. But Will, I think this has to also speak to Tino Sunseri, because to your point, Steve Clarkson is one of, if not the preeminent quarterback guru from kind of a high school to a college transition, one of the top 2, 3, 4 quarterback gurus in the entire country. So he's a very cerebral kid, having sort of absorbed all of that from his dad, learning how to play the position, learning how to play it the right way. And even though he's 5'11", he's just sort of lean. And there's sort of an interesting kind of dual threat nature to him. And, he almost sort of stylistically like plays bigger than his size in terms of like strides and things of that nature. But Will, what I find very fascinating here, and this is why the Tino Sunseri element to me is very, very significant. Look at the quarterback situation at Louisville going into this year. You talk about Tyler Shuck leaving. Miller Moss came in to be the quarterback at Louisville.
How crazy is
from
that?
USC, from where Miller was. And if you're Pierce Clarkson, you're saying, I have the opportunity to either compete with or be the backup to Miller Moss at Louisville, or have the opportunity to compete with or be the backup or the third string, to the Iamaleva brothers. And conventional wisdom perhaps would say, look, Louisville is a little bit thinner at the quarterback position than UCLA is right now. Miller Moss is in the last year of his eligibility. He could be also a kind of a good guy to learn from, just given all his experiences and the ups and the downs. But he chose UCLA. And so to me, it's not just about the coming home. I think there's an opportunity where you can see this kid really wants to compete with, I think, guys that are stylistically similar to him. Even though Nico is bigger than Pierce Clarkson is. I think stylistically they can be similar. Madness sort of still similar stylistically. He wants to compete and he wants to get that Tino Sunseri tutelage. And, I think all of the principles that sort of his dad has taught him coming in as being a prospect, he's saying, look, I want to follow the best coaching and the best competition because that's going to make me better. So I just found that decision to be really fascinating, Will, on that decision.
Yeah, I think it came down to multiple spots. I think it illustrates a kid, as I mentioned earlier, that's willing to bet on himself. But if he can do it at home, at UCLA, let's be honest, we talked about a draft episode, the Power 2 conferences, where do all the best players come from when it was in terms of the NFL draft? If you can do it on a bigger stage at home in an offense that's clearly on the upward swing with a Tino Sunseri there, why not take your chances? I mean, the ACC is great, but if you have a chance to go to UCLA, are you kidding me? I think the thing with the Iamaleava thing is Nico is going to be the starter this year. No questions asked.
Hands down.
But we've raised the issue about it. What if the NIL doesn't come in for him?
Yes.
What if, he's good enough to go pro? He is, if you look at what he is built like at the 6'5", 6'6" frame that Nico has, the guy was one of the top quarterback prospects for a reason. And his mechanics are flawless. And I think if he puts it together like we think he can in Tino's system, we could be talking about a guy that, skyrockets into the first round, given that the quarterback talent these last 2 years hasn't been to that like Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels type of standard we're used to when it comes to the NFL draft. So there's a real case, Nico, with 1 year, it could be one and done at UCLA. And that competition is wide open for Clarkson or Luke Duncan or Madden to come in and take that starting job. So if he's willing to bide his time at Louisville, why not do it at UCLA in a bigger conference?
No question, Will. And I think that it's spot on because I think everyone forgets that even though Nico started for 1 year at Tennessee, he had that redshirt year the year before, and he played in that bowl game. And you sort of got a taste of what Nico could do. So Nico's eligible to go to the NFL after this year. And to your point, look at what we have seen in college football the last few years, Will. I mean, Cam Ward, case in point. You're talking about someone who went from Washington State to Miami in 1 year. He's the number 1 overall pick in the draft. You talk about Tyler
Incarnate Ward. He was at Incarnate
Ward. Exactly. Yeah. He was Incarnate Ward for 2 years, Washington State for 2 years, and then Miami for a year and number 1 in the NFL draft. So things can change so quickly if you can put a body of work together. I mean, Nico is 1 great year away from, skyrocketing to the NFL draft. And to your point, Will, if Nico then goes, you got a Madden, you got a Luke Duncan, you got a Pierce Clarkson, it's a very compelling quarterback competition going into 2026. And if you can do it sort of at home, where you're comfortable, where, you also kind of get some of the tutelage from the guys that you learned from in high school through that Bosco pipeline. There's always kind of individual coaches that are based locally that, you can sort of tap into while you're at UCLA, really set yourself up for success. Pierce Clarkson, really interesting decision here. We're so thrilled to have him. And it just kind of shows, Will, I think I want to sort of close with this on the culture piece. You're starting to see this identity with Deshaun Foster. He's selling UCLA, the team, the brand, the program, the concept. And I think he's taken just such big swings and guys are believing and it's happening in a very methodical way. And I think to Deshaun's credit, he's really focused on 2025. 6 commits is a little bit of a lower number for 26 at this particular stage. Certainly not behind, but you got to believe that over the summer and sort of early fall, Deshaun's going to kind of ramp up the recruiting as, the season starts progressing. And Deshaun's always said it, look, my job is talent acquisition. My job is talent retention. My job is to build a culture. My job is to set the vision. I want my coordinators and my assistant coaches to really lean more into the tactics and the game over game strategy. So it's going to be, I think, interesting to see. I think Deshaun is going to perhaps shift that day-to-day tactical focus to his assistants so then he can start building this recruiting pipeline going into 2026. But very exciting indeed, Will. Anything, Will, you want to wrap up with before we sign off.
Yeah, just the efforts have been unmatched compared to what we dealt with. Chip had a lot of flaws. I think he was a genius offensive mind, and I think that, was concurrent with Ohio State getting over the hump last year and him taking a job with the Raiders. But the recruiting efforts that Foster is showing that, Chip didn't for the most part when it came to connecting with local high schools. And, talk about this, man. We got the number one quarterback and the number one running back in the transfer portal. You're getting guys that, had offers from Georgia's and Ohio State's coming to UCLA now. I mean, he's off to a, ferocious start. I think you got the right coordinator in with Tino Sunseri on the offense. I like the offensive line coach in Quan. Man, he is really kind of accelerating the process and what this program can be. And, when you're just a UCLA alumnus, you're going to put more time and effort into the program that you love and developed you as a person. So that extra, 10 to 15% that Foster's really putting in because of his passion, his love for UCLA. UCLA fans, don't take this for granted. I'm hoping the results deliver on the field like we're hoping it can. But this extra effort has allowed us to get to a position where, a couple months ago, we're like, let's get to a bowl game. I think 7 to 9 wins is very attainable with what we have. And if you get to 7 to 9 wins, the recruiting classes are going to surge here as well. So it's a great time to be a UCLA football fan. Wins don't result on paper. They come on the football field. But on paper, this team is looking a lot better than what we anticipated in January.
No question about it, Will. And I think this is sort of that beauty of local coverage versus national coverage, because I think what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. Now, to your point, it's got to translate on the field. You don't win off seasons. You don't win on paper. Just ask the Los Angeles Chargers. If you could win an off season, they'd be 7-time Super Bowl champions, 7-time national champions. You don't win in off season. They don't give you a trophy for that. You have to be able to do it on the field. But I think what we're seeing here, Will, in terms of the transfer portal you talked about quarterback and running back, offensive line, what we've done in the secondary. I think what we're seeing in terms of the swings that Deshaun Foster is making, it's really, really significant. And I don't think the national media has caught up yet, because if you look at it, Will, Vegas still has the over-under on this team as 5.5 wins. And I think that was, a fair number if you talked about this 3 or 4 months ago, to your point. But with all of these roster tweaks, the fact that it has not budged from 5.5 wins, I think there's a real arbitrage opportunity there. I certainly am not encouraging people to go gambling, even though we are sponsored by Bet Online at the LA Football Network. So if you are going to gamble, go to Bet Online for all your needs. But I think that there is an oversight that is taking place, because Vegas has not tweaked that number even after all of these transactions. So we're flying under the radar, which is, I think, exactly where we want to be. And let's start this 2025 season with a bang against Utah. And then all of a sudden, the sky is the limit here. And we can dream big in this era of 12-team playoffs. We can dream big. And that's really what May, June, and July is for. Thriller, always such a pleasure. My brother from another mother. Fans, please hit that like and subscribe button, supporting our channel as we continue to grow and grow to new heights, hopefully in the 2025 season and beyond. Much love to all of you. We'll be back as always in a few days as soon as anything crazy drops, which it's starting to get more and more frequent with UCLA football, and we're so excited about that. And as always, 4's up forever.